All right, good evening, folks, and welcome to the final online genealogy class for the spring series. I know it's technically summer now, but this does count for spring. Our topic today is researching your Revolutionary War ancestors. I'm putting a link to the handout in the chat right now for those of you who may have missed it, and I sent it out a little late. I have a few things to take care of. Oh, that's not what I meant to do. So we have a few things to take care of before we get going here. First of all, we acknowledge that the Boston Public Library's Central Library stands on land that was once a water-based ecosystem providing sustenance for the indigenous Massachusetts people and is a place which has long served as a site of meeting and exchange among nations. We are committed to land acknowledgements for all locations at which we operate. We reaffirm this commitment to set the context for our planning. Deliberations and public engagement will take place from the spirit of welcome and respect found in our motto, free to all. So the chat box is open. If you'd like to say hi and tell us where you're joining us from, please feel free but not obligated to. There are some rules though. All chat messages during the presentation and the Q&A period should be related to the topic of the presentation. And this includes all questions, comments, and any resources you may want to share. I also ask that you please be respectful of myself and all other attendees, and I will do my best to make sure that I get to all of your questions during the Q&A period. If I don't get to your question before the end of the program, you can please feel free to contact us at ask@bpl.org afterwards. So for those of you who may not know me, I'm Jessie Wheeler. I'm the genealogy specialist here at the Boston Public Library. I work in research services, which is located at the Central Library in Copley Square. Just a few more notes. So this program is being recorded, and I will be sending a link to everyone who has registered once the recording is ready. You can also check on the BPL's YouTube channel. There is a genealogy playlist. That's where this recording will eventually wind up. And with that, I will also be sending an email reminder to everyone tomorrow just to wrap up with a link to my slides for this evening, as well as to the handout and the chat transcript. So if you missed something, you don't need to worry, you'll be able to access it again. Okay, so we got a lot of folks from Massachusetts. That's great. With San Francisco. Excellent. Well, welcome everyone who's here. I hope you have access to somewhere cool to be right now. It's rather hot still out here in Massachusetts. Okay, so what we're covering today, so just a little brief introduction to researching military records, some basic facts about the Revolutionary War. We're going to go over resources you can use to research your ancestors, and that will include government resources, some books we have at the BPL, and other resources at the BPL, and then other resources outside the BPL. Oh, Taiwan, welcome. I think you might win furthest away here. All right. So most of the images you'll be seeing were produced at the time, roughly around the time of the revolution. This here is from around the same, it was done shortly after the Battle of Bunker Hill. So you can see here there's that also involved Charlestown. So this was done shortly after. So it's supposedly a fairly accurate representation of what it looked like. So these are things you should have before you start searching, and this is true just for if you're looking for any type of military records, even outside of the Revolutionary War. You should have at the least the name of the person you're researching. That's very helpful. The state in which they enlisted. So this is not necessarily the state that they lived in. It did occasionally happen that folks either just happened to be somewhere else when the call was put out, or they deliberately traveled somewhere else. So that's a good thing to know where they enlisted if you can. Also, it's good to know the approximate dates of their service. And also, you should have a clear idea of what kind of records you're looking for. So an enlistment record, a pension record, records related to the unit they served in, and going later on in history, did you want a complete personnel file? So that's something that you really should have a good idea of what you want, particularly if you are going to be visiting an archive or a library. We need to know what you want. So, and again, this is a good piece of advice for any military conflict, not just the Revolutionary War. So, cities and towns that have significant ties to military action will oftentimes have their own collections related to the conflict. So, you could try contacting local libraries or historical societies to see what they might have. And again, this is true for any type of genealogy research. If you're researching someone who lived in a particular place, try contacting the local library there or see if there's an historical society. And chances are they will either have what you're looking for or can tell you who does. So a good example here, of course, related to the battles of Lexington and Concord, Lexington has their own museum and archive, which was founded in 1886 here. So they have a pretty significant collection related not just to the Revolutionary era, but to the history of just Lexington in general. But they do have a pretty good collection related to the battle, of course, because it took place there. So that's just one example. Not everyone is going to be quite as robust as Lexington is, but it's still, a good thing to try. If there's a particular battle you're interested in, figure out if there's, again, contact the library there, or maybe do some Googling to see if they have an archive devoted to either to that battle or that has collections related to the battle. So now we're just going to get into some basic definitions. These are going to be useful as you go forward in your research. So there were many different units, groups that participated in the battles. First, there was the Continental Army. So this is a precursor to what is now the U.S. Army. It was centrally organized and controlled. So this was what George Washington was eventually in charge of. And these would consist of soldiers from all 13 colonies. Then this was formed shortly after the beginning of the war. There was also, believe it or not, the Continental Navy. There were some limited military engagements, so that, much like the Continental Army, was centrally organized and controlled. Started shortly after the war and is a precursor to the U.S. Navy. Also, a loyalist. So this would be someone who fought against American independence, or whether if they didn't fight, they supported the loyalist cause, the cause of the British Crown, or maintained loyalty to the Crown, whether that was monetarily, providing materials, or otherwise. So some things that this can be a little confusing for folks. Not everyone who fought in the Revolutionary War on the side of the Patriots was in the Continental Army. A lot of them actually were in militias. So militias were at that time, they would be groups of locally organized and controlled so part-time civilian soldiers. And when the war started, these were the only soldiers available at that could fight. So these were the people that Paul Revere and William Dawes and Samuel Prescott were riding through the countryside, trying to get them to come to Lexington or Concord. This is all they had. So it was pretty common practice at the time. And this would generally be able-bodied men over a certain age. They would be responsible for protecting the town if such help was needed. So most people actually were in a local militia, not so much the Continental Army. The Continental Army was pretty big, but a lot of people who fought in the war were in a local militia, and they did support the Continental Army once it was established, and they also would act on their own to protect the citizens of their town. And so this is another term that I'm going to be using pretty frequently here, just for brevity's sake. So a patriot would be someone who fought for or otherwise supported American independence. And this includes anyone who physically fought in a battle or supported either monetarily or through providing supplies such as livestock, food, and what have you. The state navy, again, like the militias, these were organized and controlled by individual colonies to protect their shoreline. So some of these did exist prior to the establishment of the Continental Navy. Some of them were established after, but again, this is apart from the Continental Navy. So you're going to see this mostly in the states that had large shorelines that were of interest. So you're going to see a lot of those in the southern areas after 1776 or during 1776 once the siege of Boston ended. You'll see these folks. So again, just some basic facts, just so we can keep all this in mind. The two dates that everyone seems to agree on for this, the war began on April 19th, 1775, with the battles of Lexington and Concord, and ended on September 3rd, 1783, with the surrender of General Cornwallis. So, so the war began with Lexington and Concord in Massachusetts. So we have a particular interest in that here in Massachusetts. Also of note, Massachusetts contributed more soldiers to the Patriot cause than any other colony at that time. Massachusetts soldiers and sailors fought in almost every single major engagement during the war. And there were over 200,000 colonists who fought on the Patriot side. So that might not seem like a lot now, but this area was far more sparsely populated back then, so that is still a pretty significant amount. Also, one thing to keep in mind, about 70,000 colonists fought on the Loyalist side. There was no unified feeling on that. Some people who lived here just thought we should stay part of the United Kingdom. Also, something that can cause a little confusion, there were different Native American tribes fought on both sides. They would have different reasons for this. So if you have Native American ancestry, it's entirely possible that they could have either fought on the Loyalist or the Patriot side. Also, something to keep in mind, the French and the Spanish allies fought on the Patriot side. We actually probably would not have won the war without the French in particular. That's another thing to keep in mind. On the Loyalist side, there were hired German soldiers known as Hessians, which a lot of folks, especially those of us from New England, have probably heard of the Hessians. They were kind of a big deal. Okay, so Revolutionary War records. So one thing you should keep in mind, and this is true even for the pre-Revolutionary War era, record keeping was kind of spotty. That's not something that they were really focused on at the time, saving things for posterity for those of us today to do some research. So some records might be pretty hard to find, and new things are being discovered all the time. So this is, like I say this with other things, if you haven't found something, it doesn't necessarily mean it doesn't exist. It just means it's not accessible yet. Just keep plugging away. Another thing to keep in mind is a lot of resources were compiled through the efforts of volunteers. This is true of one of the resources we're going to talk about in a little bit. And sometimes these things weren't compiled or published until years or decades after the war, so they might not have complete information. This is another thing to keep in mind. Record keeping had improved quite a bit by the time you get to the Civil War, when they were saving records because they knew they wanted to keep this information, but during the Revolutionary War, they weren't really doing that much. All right, so we're going to talk about some government resources. Quite a lot of the resources for the government are going to come from the government, though not everything. This here is a picture of a memorial to the Lexington Minutemen. So this is in Lexington. It's a really cool memorial. So the National Archives is pretty much your go-to for military records, and covers the entirety of U.S. history. Some of you may have heard on the news yesterday, there's now going to be some restrictions on who can access the National Archives. So whether or not you might be able to access these records might change in the coming months or years, depending on how things turn out. But what I can say for now, they do have a pretty significant collection related to military service during the war, and that includes the continental armies and navies, as well as state militias and state navies. So they also have a really good explainer, just going over all the different types of records that they have. They have things like bounty land records. So what this would be is sometimes instead of giving soldiers money for their service, they gave them land. It may not necessarily have been land that belonged to the United States at the time, but that is something that happened both during the Revolutionary War as well as during the War of 1812. So that will looking at these records, you can get a good idea of like their service, and then also that might also help you figure out where they might have moved to. They will also have records related to the Continental Congress, which started after the war began. They'll have various types of judicial records, so the early beginnings of courts, some military service records, pension records, prisoner of war records, and some images and various other things. So they have a pretty good, eclectic mix of things that they have, not just, your standard enlistment records, things like that. So because the war did actually start in Massachusetts and a lot of precursor events occurred here, the Massachusetts State Archives also has a significant collection of things related to it. And also just in general, if you're researching colonial era of Massachusetts, the Massachusetts Archives collection is a great resource. What this is a 320 volumes. It's also called the Felt Collection. It also has some records from Maine and New Hampshire, which were at various points in time part of Massachusetts. So they have original records from the 17th and 18th century with a particular focus on the Revolutionary War era. They actually will have multiple volumes here. So it covers from 1775 to 1780. They have records from the General Court, governor's records, and various other things. And you can see a detailed listing of all the of what's in all the volumes. Here it will tell you they're organized roughly chronologically. And that'll tell you different things that they have. They have really, I strongly recommend going to the Massachusetts State Archives if you're doing research for this time period in Massachusetts. They have a ton of really great stuff. Like I said, so in addition to legislative records, so this will be files from the Massachusetts General Court. They will also have executive records. So these will be files from governing council. So these would be things like the committees of safe. So this would be governor's records, the various groups that were in charge of various places during the war, finance records, and things like that. So this is another pretty good resource to look at. Other thing they have stuff beyond paper records and files and books and things like that. They have a connection of, they call it non-textual materials. So they have, particularly related to the Revolutionary War, they will have maps and plans. They have currency. They have engraved silver done by Paul Revere, who was actually, his profession was a silversmith. And various military things, so some antique weaponry, some time capsules, other commemorative items, stuff like that. So that's another, if you're able to go see some of those things, that can be pretty cool. So in addition to the state archives, you can also try the state library. They have a significant collection of digitized resources, and they're always adding new things, like almost every day they're adding new things in here. So again, this is a good resource if you're looking into Massachusetts in general. You can see they have over 69 different collections, not just related to the Revolutionary War, but it covers they basically have documentation for almost the entire history of what is now Massachusetts from the very beginning. This will include things like broadsides. Let's see if we can find a good one here. There we go. There we go. So you can see here it goes way, way, way back to the 1770s and the Provincial Congress. You can see here, this is related to the presence of British troops in Boston. So we can take a look at this if it will load for me. And it wants me to download. We're not going to do that. Okay. But you can see in the thumbnail here, it is an actual scan of an original document. So they have a lot of this stuff going way back even before the Revolutionary War. And in addition to broadsides, they'll have, House and Senate journals, or the equivalent of such, whatever was called at the time. Mostly it's going to be things in the Massachusetts General Court from that time period. This will also include laws that were passed, again, going back to the 1600s. Also things like registers and directories. Again, let's load for us. There we go. And this includes, so this is various almanacs. So let's see if I can get this one to work. So almanacs were actually pretty popular during this time period. This is one of the things Benjamin Franklin used to do. So they would have, if you can get this to load. There you go, and someone wrote in it. So there we go. So it would have a calendar, would have the distances to various places, the capitals, populations, counties, different travel routes. So sometimes they would have weather information, they'd have information about currency. It's just, again, really fascinating. And this is one thing I also like to encourage folks to do, is not just to research the person that you want to look into, but also research the time period that they lived in. I think it's very valuable to have a good idea of what was going on during their time, what was going on in their life, what was going on around them, just so you can get a good, picture of their life. So in addition to all of those lovely digital resources, which you can get from anywhere, they actually, if you're able to go in person, they have a pretty good collection of historical newspapers that goes back into the 1700s. They have some they have some newspapers from prior to the Revolutionary War, some things that were published during. Some of them will be original copies, some of them will be on microfilm. There is some overlap between what we have here, between them and what we have here at the BPL, but they do have some things that we don't have. So it's definitely still worth checking into them if this is something you're interested in looking at. And they also have, this is again pretty useful for whole time period, they have a great resource called the Legislative Biographical File. So what they have done is they have, like exactly what it sounds like, files that contain biographical information about every single member of the Massachusetts General Court and all of its predecessors. So basically, anyone who is in any kind of legislature from the colonial era up to now, they have a biography of. It may not be fairly extensive. Some of them are going to be a bit more robust than others, but if you're looking into someone who was in politics in Massachusetts, it's a pretty useful resource. This was someone who was done by, this was done by the state librarian back in the 19th century. You can see here it's 44,000 cards. So that's a lot of people. So again, there might not be a ton of information, but I've personally found in many cases, they're often the only ones that have any information about a person I was looking into during this time period. Okay, so this is more just for fun. If you happen to live in the area, I keep trying to get more people to go to this. Attached in the same area as the Massachusetts State Archives out in Dorchester is the Commonwealth Museum. And they do right now have a special exhibit that they just extended the dates for, called Upon Such Ground, Massachusetts and the Birth of a Revolution. So it's a part of a series of events that they have related to the 250th anniversary. And you can just see here some of the things that they have on display. Is a drum that was used at the Battle of Bunker Hill, a bill from Paul Revere for all of the rides he took, different things belonging to Paul Revere. They have some swords, various proclamations, a letter from John Hancock to the Provincial Congress, discharge papers signed by George Washington. So if you're in the Boston area from now until July 9th, definitely check it out. They have some really cool things on display, and they just have a few pictures here. They also do have some related online exhibits. So this is something that you can look at online. Uh, they had a few years ago, they had a Road to Revolution series. So they have something on the stamp tax crisis of 1765, and they will have pictures of some artifacts in there. Something about the occupation of Boston, which actually started long before the war. That was part of the issue that led to it. And also they have an online exhibit on the Boston Tea Party because of course we need to have that. So that's just, again, I'm always trying to get more people to utilize them. It's a really cool little museum. All right, so now we're gonna look at some books. So this is one of the few images I have in here that was done later. This is an idealized version of Washington taking command of the Continental Army. This was done about 100 years later by Currier and Ives, so it probably didn't look exactly like this, but it is, I still thought it's a pretty cool image. So this right here is one of the main things that I send people to, was particularly when they're just starting out researching a Revolutionary War ancestor. This is the Massachusetts Soldiers and Sailors of the Revolutionary War. This is a 17-volume set that was put together by the state. Again, it wasn't right after the war, it was about 100 or so years later. So it's not necessarily going to have all the information that is now available, but it was all the information that was available at the time. So this here you can see, we can read it. So this is just a sample entry. This is for someone named Lemuel Holden. So what it'll have here, tell you the different records they consulted. So it'll tell you he received wages. It'll tell you when he enlisted and when he was discharged from various units, because much like if you're familiar with the Civil War, in many cases, soldiers just enlisted for a fairly short term of service, and a lot of times they would re-enlist either in a different unit or maybe the same one. So this will go over all the paperwork that they looked at, the different units he served in, and so on and so forth. So this one is actually fairly detailed. Unfortunately, not all of them are going to be quite as detailed. If I can get this page to come up, I can show you. There we go. Also, just as a reminder for folks who might have come in a little late, I will be sending everyone a follow-up email tomorrow. That'll have a link to the handout, my slides, and the chat transcript. So don't worry if you missed something, and this was recorded. There you go. So again, so this guy here, this Levi Holden, had a lot more information on him. But then you look down here, Mitchell Holden, there's not a heck of a lot. So also, it should say if they were killed. It may not always. Again, they were just going on what they had available at the time. There might be more information than what was available back then. This, like so we just looked at it, it is available online. You can either do a Google search for it, it should come up, or you can go through the BPL's website. Our catalog entry has links to all 17 volumes. But I will say though, they do not have a table of contents readily available, so I put this together. So it is organized alphabetically by the last name of the person. And it is divided kind of oddly. There were apparently a lot of B's here. So this will also be in your handout, this breakdown of the contents. I just thought I would make it a little easier for folks who might want to look at this. So that'll tell you what name is in each one. Okay, so the last one was a government thing, so that's going to be public domain, it's readily available online. The rest of the things we're looking at will not generally be online. These are scans that I took myself a while back, for the first time I did this class. So one book that's great is Abstract at the Graves of Revolutionary Patriots. So this is here, it's basically a list of names and where they were buried. It doesn't really say much else. But a lot of folks like to see if they can try to visit the graves of their revolutionary ancestors. So this is something you can do. You can see here, these folks, some folks are buried in Kingston, Rhode Island, Cummington, Boston. There's one here for South Carolina and one for Maine. The numbers, I believe, are the plots, but I'm not 100% sure of that. So that's something you won't be able to access online. But if you don't live in the Boston area and can't come into yours hard copy, you should be able to find this in other libraries near where you are. Okay. So this is another pretty useful one, especially for genealogy. It's called Genealogical Abstracts of the Revolutionary War Pension Files. So this is from National Archives materials. Some people went through it and basically transcribed all this information. So these are taken from pension files. So why pension files are useful is not only will it have the name of the person who received the pension, but after they pass away, chances are they have a next of kin who also needed to receive the pension, such as a spouse or a child or so on and so forth. So in this case, particularly in this one, this Benjamin Copley, it has the name of his wife, whose name was Hannah, and it also lists his children. So it would also list any children if they were in there. So this will give you an idea when he applied. So he applied for his pension in 1832, so we know he survived the war, and also tells you where he was living, although it just gives you the county. And then that he lived in West Springfield, and then tells you where he was born, even gives you his birth date, because this is information they had to provide. And then after he passed away, his wife continued to apply for benefits. And so it tells you when they applied, and then tells you, even gives you her maiden name, and also the day that they married and the day that they died. So not only will you get information, all this information about Benjamin, you get that for his wife, Hannah. So that's why these are really, really cool things to look at, because now you have all the stuff about his wife. You can start researching her as well. And sometimes if there was no surviving spouse, it'll be a surviving child that applied for the benefits. And and this covers all over the country. So you can see this person down here, Samuel Copley. He served in Connecticut, but eventually when he applied, he was in Ohio. So then that gives you an idea, because a lot of folks might have moved afterward. That gives you an idea of where they went to. If you lost track of them during the war, this can tell you where they went if they survived the war. So again, this is something that is in library use only in Boston. It's not available online. But if you have a robust genealogy collection at the library near where you live, you should be able to find this. And it is 8 volumes, so it is pretty hefty. Okay, so this is something that more people have had interest in lately. This resource called Women Patriots of the American Revolution. So relatively recently, the different lineage societies, such as the Daughters of the American Revolution, Sons of the American Revolution, have started accepting applications based on women patriots. So this would be women who supported the patriot cause in some way, because women weren't technically allowed to fight in the war, although a few did. This generally means they provided money, they provided food, water, livestock, some kind of materials. So you can go by these women now. So what this book is a list of 600 women who in some way, shape, or form supported the patriot cause, and also 4,500 women who were compensated for damage from the British, such as you can see this person here, her home was burned by the British, so she got some form of compensation for that eventually. Or they provided provisions. You can see here this Mary Hathaway Borden. This tells you when she was born, who she was married to. So it says here her husband was captured by the British in 1778, and their home and mills were destroyed in Rhode Island. And some of these women you can see here. Most of this will just be a list of names and a little bit of information, but in another section of the book there are more extensive biographies. So people who were more well known, they'll have longer entries, and they'll be so these letters and numbers here refer to the resources they used to gather this information, and it's in the front of the book. You'll be able to figure out what resource they went to. So if you want to do further research on them, you'll be able to go back to that. So this is another thing that is really useful. If you're interested in joining a lineage society, a lot of folks are, you can get there if you can prove that you have a female ancestor who supported the Patriot cause. Okay, so on the other side, like I said earlier, there were colonists who supported the crown, the British monarchy. So that can be important research as well. So there's also this book here, Biographical Sketches of Loyalists of the American Revolution. The list has information about of over 1,000 loyalists. So this information is taken from the Loyalist Claims Commission. So these will be folks who either served in the war or lost property during the war and went to this commission to get compensated for their lost property or to get paid for their service. So this example here, Elisha Hutchinson, he was involved in the Boston Tea Party, so he was a part of that whole thing. He got a pension, and then it tells you where he retired, and it tells you how much he was paid for his losses in the revolution. So his whole house is basically ransacked and destroyed, which was kind of unfortunate because he was working on a detailed history of the colony, and that was lost. So that one is a little unfortunate. Again, these letters and numbers here, that refers to the different resources they looked at. That'll tell you which of the papers that they looked at for that information. And so this will give you a little bit more. Okay, so sorry, I misspoke. So Elisha Hutchinson, he was the son of the colonial governor Hutchinson, and his father was the one who his home was destroyed in the run up to the war, and the history was destroyed. So this gives you more information, this book, which is just Massachusetts. The previous book tells you different areas. So this will give you a pretty good biography. It'll tells you, says he left America to go to England in 1774 and said he was going to come back, but he never did, and tells you where he died. Give you some information about his children, his occupation, and his marriages and things like that. So again, you might, if you're interested in researching a loyalist that you might descend from, this is something that can help you out with that. But again, these are going to tend to be the more prominent people. You're not going to get absolutely everyone who was a loyalist during the war. A lot of folks actually wound up leaving. They either went back to England once the war was over, once the siege of Boston ended, and a lot of folks actually migrated up to Canada. So it's another thing to keep in mind. You might need to do some research in Canada if you're researching a loyalist ancestor. Okay, so now we're going to move on to some other cool resources we have. This is a map that was done shortly after the Battle of Bunker Hill in 1775. I really like this one because it shows you a little bit of like what the Boston area looked like before the landfill. So a lot of this here on the left-hand side of the map has since been filled in. Noddle Island is now East Boston. That's where the airport was kind of in this area. And you can see here, this is Charlestown, and this is before there were bridges, so you had to take a ferry there. So I really like that map. Okay. So we have a few different databases that will have some information about the Revolutionary War. There's 18th century collections online, which I apologize, I can't really get into right now because my internet is a little funky. It didn't work when I tested it earlier. So I'm actually not at the library. I'm working from home, so I can't get into absolutely everything, but I can tell you, let me see if it'll do it for me right now. Okay. So if you're accessing this from home, you'd need to type in your library card number or your e-card number if you live in Massachusetts. And again, if you don't live in Massachusetts, check with your local library, and yeah, it's not coming in. So basically what they have are going to be more like ephemera things. So broadsides, so those would be posters, notices, letters, manuscripts, some books, and things like that. They have over 1,400 items in the Revolutionary War collection, so that's pretty cool. Also, there's American Ancestors, which is run by the New England Historic Genealogical Society, which is located not too far from the Central Library in Boston. Again, I'm working from home, so I won't be able to look at everything here, but there is some stuff you can access without being at the BPL. There are some free things. So let me see if I can. Okay, there we go. Okay, so we're gonna look at A to Z. And so if you go into here, you can click on only free databases. So these will be databases that you can access for free. You do have to have a guest account to use them, but let's see if there we go. So these are just a few of the things they have. So Weymouth has put together their own index of soldiers and sailors from there. There's pension records from the Navy, and then just a general pension record. And the DAR has a collection of Patriots of Color. So again, these are things you can get to for free. There's a lot more that you can access. Oh, actually, yeah. So there's a fair amount that you can get to for free. Some of them you would only be able to look at images, so you'd have to try to decipher the handwriting. Again, it's really cool. You can also always just send them a chat. They have a free chat that's available Tuesday through Saturday from 10 to 6. So if you have a question that we can't answer at the BPL or that your local library can't answer, they can help you out with that. There's also a pretty good collection of things on Ancestry Library Edition. So this will look a little different if you're using the library subscription. Again, this is something you would have to come into the BPL to use, but if you're not in Massachusetts, most big enough public libraries will have Ancestry.com. So you just check with your local library and chances are they probably have it. So you can see here they have 33 different collections of military records in here, including state militia records, which I mentioned earlier, which are very important because a lot of folks served in those. They'll have lists of officers. They have all sorts of things. They have different publications. They have books. They also give you a nice little timeline of some of the major actions during the war. And we're logged into my personal account, so it's going to look a little different for you all. So whoops, that's not the way I want to do it. So if we type in the name of one of the guys we were looking at earlier, Lemuel Holden. There you go. So there's 38 records that come up. So there's pension records, there's war rolls. So these are basically so-and-so was here during roll call. So that just tells you where they were at a particular moment in time. They also have the soldiers and sailors in the Revolutionary War, the thing we were looking at earlier. Service records, again, more muster rolls, things like that. Also burial records. So this is obviously a different person. Another cool thing they have in here is Sons of the American Revolution membership application. So if this is something that you're trying to do to join the SAR or the DAR, this can be very helpful because this documents all this information. So again, these are just applications. It doesn't necessarily mean they were accepted. And also standards have changed for both organizations over time. So the evidence offered for some of these applications may not be acceptable anymore. They can still, be a good way to get some basic information. So this will give you something to look up, and see if you can find information to support it. So this application will tell you the person they claim descent from, where they were born, where they died, and then their entire lineage from themselves all the way up to the person they're claiming descent from. So this can be pretty, again, it's not going to necessarily all be 100% accurate, but like I said, it's a very good jumping off point. So that's one of the more interesting things that Ancestry.com has. In addition to databases that you would need to log into, we do have some completely free resources that you can look at online, including a relatively new website resource called American Revolutionary Geographies Online. That was a project taken on by the Leventhal Map Center at the BPL and the George Washington Presidential Library. So they have, you can type in, so this is going to be primarily maps and other related documents. So for instance, if you wanted to see what they had on Bunker Hill, I'll come up with all these different maps of Bunker Hill and the area around Bunker Hill, some images, and these are all done around the time of the Battle of Bunker Hill. Sometimes you'll have some earlier things. A lot of these will be things called plan of action, so those can be really handy. That'll tell you where the troops were, where different actions took place, where the fortifications were, and things like that. Let me see. Oh, there we go. And sometimes you can see here they've had the compilation of various things. So let's see if we can get, there we go. And this here also tells you where there was an armed transport and gives you the lines of cannon fire that they could do from those ships. And there's two little boats over here. So this is really, if you're interested in learning about the actual battles, this is a really great resource. And oh, sorry. So they also have some interesting stuff that I hope I can find earlier. So fun fact, the Battle of Bunker Hill actually took place on Breed's Hill, not Bunker Hill. So there's two different families, the Bunkers and the Breeds, the Breeds are still kind of not all that thrilled about the battle being named after the wrong hill. But one cool thing they have here, in addition to a map, is a powder horn that has a map of Boston and Charlestown on it from 1777. So this was obviously done as a memento for someone. Might have been someone on the Loyalist side here, because you can see the insignia for King George III there. Yes, it was 47th Infantry of Foot, which was a British unit. So this is something that was done for soldier, and sometimes they'll have information on the provenance here. Yeah, so this one, yeah. So this one, apparently somewhere on there, it says a pox on rebels and their crimes. So I thought that was really cool. So I wanted to show that to you. So that's just one of the things that's in that. There's also, the BPL has a pretty robust collection of manuscripts that we have scanned. So this includes a casualty list for the Battle of Lexington and Concord. So again, these are handwritten original documents, so they might be a little hard to make out. Let's see if we can zoom in. So this gives the names. Come on, it doesn't want to behave itself here. So it will give you the names of the people that died and where they were from. So you can kind of make out this one goes here. So these are all the folks who were from Lexington who died in the battle. And then you have here someone from Lynn. So this is just one of the few really cool things that we have that you can take a look at. And so there's also going to be letters, orders from the British Army. We have supply lists, cash books, some really, really cool things. There's almost 1,200 documents in here. So again, this is another way, like if you happen to be researching someone who wrote a letter or is mentioned in here, this is a really cool resource. It's also just really interesting stuff to look at if you're a history nerd like me. So in addition to those, we also have various items in Digital Commonwealth. Digital Commonwealth is a statewide resource that gets contributions from libraries and historical societies and other organizations from all over the state, and the BPL has also put some stuff in here. You'll see there'll be some overlap between this and the other resource we looked at. But still, you'll have here stuff that happened during the time of the war that necessarily didn't have to do with the war. So you can see here, this is an indenture record, but It was in 1778, so it doesn't necessarily have to do with the war, but it was from that time. So it gives you context for that era, what was going on. There'd also be some more maps. There's a lot of indenture records in here. So if you're researching someone who may not necessarily have fought in the war, but happened to live in this area during that time, you might find something on them in here. We also do have a copy of his famous print. That is done by Paul Revere, but which he copied from someone else. Okay, so in addition to some online resources, some of those online resources, we have research guides. These are put together by staff at the BPL, and some of them might be useful. So there is, in our massive genealogy research guide, we have a section on military records. And we have a section on the Revolutionary War. So this will go over a lot of the stuff we're talking about today, plus a few other books that might be useful. And I'll give you links to other things in here. And in another research guide we have, that is a digitized records from the Boston City departments, we have the Record Commissioner reports. So these are put together in the 19th century. Obviously, the commission was formed to put together every possible record they could find from early Boston history, primarily the colonial era. And why this is important is it includes things from the Revolutionary War era. So in this section right here, you'll see there's selectmen's records and town records. The selectmen's records kind of end. There really aren't any during the siege. You can see here, so between April 1775 and March 1776, the selectmen weren't allowed to meet, so there aren't any records. But there were still town records. So this can give you an idea of what was actually going on at the time. There's information about their reactions to the Boston Tea Party and the Boston Massacre and things like that. So if you had relatives that were involved in any actions in Boston during the time, this is a really great resource to look at. And also there's another research guide that goes over just a brief overview at the American Revolution in Massachusetts, which does include Maine. So Maine is part of it. So this gives you just an overview of events that led up to the war, overview of the battles that took place during that time. This is just Massachusetts, so it doesn't cover outside of that period of time. Again, it goes back to what I said. I encourage folks to research the history of the place where your person lived. So if you want to know more about the events surrounding this, it's a good resource. Okay, this is another local maps, really cool map. So this is the burning of Falmouth, which is now Portland, Maine. They pretty much lost they lost a lot of their town. It was burnt in 1775. So there's they lost a good portion of the town. You can see the destroyed part right here. So we're not going to look at all of these. I'll just tell you. So Cindy's list is basically for those of you who are old enough like me to remember when Yahoo had directories. That's basically what this is. It's a link to online records and other resources. It is done solely by a woman named Cindy, so she's just one person. So you might find some broken links in there, but if you let her know, she should be able to fix it. So this will just give you information about different links to different websites that cover different topics. Another really great resource is the DAR, the Daughters of the American Revolution. They do have some collections that you can look at online. So that's their genealogical research system. You can't get everything. They will not let you look at the application packets. They want you to pay for those. So those are not going to be, yeah. So basically what they have is an index of various things that you can look at. Let's see. All right. So let's see. We're going to check out our Lemuel Holden. There you go. So these are people that Okay, so these are people, so yeah, so this is the descendant search, so this will tell you who they were related to, so you can get some basic information, and plus, so this will also tell you their standards have changed, so some piece of evidence that was submitted for this person is no longer accepted, but this will give you some basic information about where they served, their military rank, and so on. And if you want to look at associated paperwork to them, you can purchase that. So if you're really getting deep into that, that's a good place to go. Another one completely free resource is familysearch.org, basically Wikipedia for genealogy. They have links to different types of records from different locations. It'll tell you things that are online. So it's click on North Carolina. They'll also tell you what the records are, how to look at the records that they have, and information that's on it. And it'll also give you tips for how to proceed and different links to other things that you can look at. So these are going to be a little bit more specific. So if you happen to be researching someone who was in Valley Forge, there's an ongoing project to digitize and index all of the muster rolls. So you can try searching for your ancestor in there. And again, I'm just gonna, just for the heck of it, see if there's any hold-ins that come up. There you go. So this will tell you their name, their rank, where they were from, what regiment they served with. So you can see here again, Valley Forge, not in Massachusetts, but even just with these hold-ins, most of them are from Massachusetts. So Massachusetts was a big deal. And this will tell you also the captain of their company. And then you can click on more details here. And it'll give you even more information. And if you do happen to find someone you're descended from, that you can get a cool certificate that has their name on it. Okay, so also one of these, this is a free resource that was just done by someone interested in genealogy. So these are Continental Army orderly books. Again, this is just the Continental Army. So they have unit records. You can get some information about the orderly books. So this will tell you all about it. It goes into a little bit of what I was talking about as to how record keeping was kind of scattershot and how there's a bunch of different things that people are still finding and still transcribing to this day. So this has a good amount of information even if you're just interested in learning more about the Continental Army. So the Sons of the American Revolution also has genealogy resource, but as I will just say, it's not quite as robust as the DAR. So just keep that in mind, that they do have it. So if you're interested in learning more about the war in general, I have a few links here that you can try. So the National Park Service has a page on the American Revolution that has some pretty cool images on here and links to various national park sites that you can visit that are related to it. And you can, this map we're working, it would show you where they were and goes over different people. The Library of Congress also has a pretty good collection. So this will, oops. So you can look at things that they have that are digitized. They have timelines and information about all these different events leading up to the war, as well as immediately afterward. And also, the BPL, beyond the books I've already talked about, has lots and lots and lots of books about the Revolutionary War. So you can see a listing of what we have here on our website. We got David McCullough, obviously, and we've got things about specific wars, specific battles, things about different units, things about specific people, all sorts of things. Okay, so those are the ends. That's the end of my slides. So we have some time for questions. I'm gonna post a link to the handout again, just for anyone who might have come in a bit late. Just a reminder that this class was recorded. I'll be sending an email to everyone once the recording is available. You can also keep an eye on the genealogy playlist on the BPL's YouTube channel. And I'll be sending a follow-up email to everyone tomorrow that will have a link to the handout as well as my slides and the chat transcript. Yeah, Let me see. So let's see. So we have someone here from North Carolina. Welcome. Okay. Virginia. All right, so we'll just wait a couple minutes. So this is, like I said, this is the final genealogy class of the spring. We will be coming back in September. Okay, so Gina's asking, how accurate is Find a Grave? So that depends. So Find a Grave is like Wikipedia. It's based on user submissions, so you kind of have to take everything with a grain of salt. If you're fortunate, if they have a picture of the grave on there, then that is pretty accurate because that tells you what was actually on the grave. Any other information that's on there, you kind of have to take it with a grain of salt, particularly if they don't cite their sources. Sometimes these, people will be really generous and these long write-ups and tell you their sources. That doesn't happen with everyone, unfortunately. Yeah, so that's just, again, Find a Grave, like with any website that counts on user contributions, take it with a grain of salt. Okay. All right, so like I said, this is our last genealogy class of the quote-unquote spring. We will be coming back in September. If you have any suggestions for topics you'd like me to cover. Oh, Linda's asking, I believe that Nantucket voted to be neutral. Yes, that is true. So you're not going to have a heck of a lot for Nantucket. Oh, okay. So Kathy is asking, can you tell us more about the orderly books? Okay, so let me see if I can get back there. Okay, where did that come from? Oh, there we go. So again, these are the orderly books are focused. Oops. Okay, so let's see. Okay. So basically, these are just the unit histories somewhat. So you would click on a state. So you the kind of annoying thing back then, unlike the Civil War where things were numbered and lettered, so you'd have like first infantry, second, company B with logical nomenclature. They didn't have that in the Revolutionary War. It was basically just named after the leader of the unit. So this is particularly true with a lot of the militias. It'll just have the captain of like whoever was in charge. The Continental Army, they will have unit numbers, but a lot of them will just have the name of a person. So let's pick this one at random. So this will tell you when it was formed, when it disbanded, where their base was, basically where it was mustered. That's basically, they're still in the process of transcribing these, and they do, if you have clarifying information, they will accept it. But that's basically what these are, is basically lists of different units and the time they existed. And also they'll give you information about where they got the record from over here on the right-hand column. Okay, so, and also what were you saying about changes at the National Archives? So it was recently announced, this has so far only affected the National Archives at College Park in Maryland, that they will now be restricted access to people who have legitimate business interest in looking at something there. So they're no longer just open to the public at large. So that was just something really recent. It just happened yesterday. So far, again, that only has affected the National Archives location at College Park, Maryland. Just with the current administration, things are changing with things like this. That's something just to, keep in mind. Let me see if I can pull up the announcement for you. So College Park, it won't really affect most of what you're looking at here, because a lot of the stuff will be at the National Archives in DC. So right now, those are still open, but again, these things can change because there's a lot of stuff changing these days. Okay, let me see. Yeah, so that is starting July 7th. Let's see. Okay, so now I can't find the announcement here, but yeah, so that's again. it just might make things a little tricky in the future. So again, always just keep that in mind. Oh, restriction. Oh, that's interesting. So BJ is saying Nara, Maryland was a restriction on parking, not admission. Okay, well that's interesting. Okay, well it's still generally a good idea, but especially before you go out to visit a place, to call or email ahead just to make sure they'll be open on the day you want to get there and you'll be able to access the collection you're looking at. That's even true for libraries, so I always recommend folks contact us ahead of time just to make sure we'll be open when you're going to be there. Also to make sure you can get to what you're looking for, because there are some collections that we can't just pull them for you when you get there. So we have to make arrangements to pull stuff for you, but we can definitely do it. So always, I think calling ahead is a good idea just in general. So thank you for that information, BJ. Okay. All right. Okay, so oops, that is not what I wanted to do. Okay, so if anyone comes up with any questions once we log off here, you can feel free to email us at ask@bpl.org. You'll be getting a link to a survey once we close out here. If you have any suggestions on any topics you'd like me to cover, or any suggestions for any types of guest speakers you'd like us to contact, feel free to put that in there or send us an email. We are always looking for your ideas, because we like doing these. So yes, it was a lot. So like I said at the beginning, you'll be getting a follow-up email from me tomorrow that will include a link to the handout, to the slides, and also the chat transcript. And also this was recorded. I will be sending a link to everyone who is registered when the recording is available. You can also keep an eye on our YouTube channel. There's a genealogy playlist in the BPL YouTube channel, and that's where the recording will end up. All right, well, thank you all for coming. I hope those of you who are in the Boston area have found a way to stay cool. It's really, really hot today, and hope everyone else has a good night and a good weekend.